Now that we've learned about how to do muscle cleans from the high hip, now we're ready to start talking about the high hang power clean, where we're going to be adding in a little bit of leg drive, but also learning how to pull under and receive the bar at slightly lower position than pulling all the way up to the top of the muscle clean. So now it is important that we learn about the receiving position of the clean and ensuring that our hips and knees have the capability to go down into that squat if we were given it the opportunity to turn this into a squat clean. First, let's talk about where you're gonna receive the bar. So go ahead and bring that bar up to your front rack position, having those hands opened, elbows up as far as possible. Bar should be resting right on the back of the shoulders, right in the beefy part of the shoulders, right up against the neck. So at this point, I want you to set your feet up where you would normally do your air squats, front squat, or back squat. For me, that's just outside shoulder width apart. And if it helps you to point your toes ever so slightly out, about 11 and 1 o'clock, that may help you to get a little bit more mobility when going into the squat. We're just gonna practice some dips and going into a quarter squat. We're not gonna go into a whole squat, but we're just gonna practice bending at the hips and the knees. So we're finding that crease at the hip, finding that crease at the knees, and we're sending our hips back, sending our knees just slightly forward, and keeping the weights even through the feet, keeping our feet fully grounded. We're gonna practice dipping up and down just a few times. And where you're finding that your hips and knees are just bending about a couple of inches, this is going to be your receiving position for the power clean. So we're not receiving it with straight legs, with a squeezed butt. We are receiving it with a slight bend in the hips. And you'll notice that your body, your overall torso actually drops a couple of inches from your standing position. So when you're cleaning the bar and when you're pulling the bar all the way up to your front rack, what a lot of people forget is that your body actually drops a couple inches from that standing position. So oftentimes a lot of people will pull much higher and then the bar will crash on the shoulders. So as a reminder, your body is going to descend just a little bit lower when you pull under to receive it. So we're thinking about getting the bar roughly to about the middle of our sternum or the middle of our chest, okay? So when the bar gets to about this point is basically where we're going to be pulling under the bar. So let's do a drill that practices the quick turnover of how to get into that receiving position. We're gonna start on the toes in our jumping stance. So pretending that we are already jumped and using our legs in the clean, starting on the toes. We're gonna pull that bar right up to the middle of the chest, having the elbows over the bar. Knuckles are gonna point down to keep that bar close to you. We don't want that bar to travel away, so it should be right against the chest. And you wanna keep those forearms pointed down. We're going to lift our feet, plant them in our squat stance, and at the same time that our feet land, and we listen for our feet, we're gonna have those elbows all the way through and punched forward. So the goal is to have the elbows punch through and landing at the exact same time that your feet hit. So again, let's go on the toes, pull that bar up to the sternum, pause for just a moment, and then you're gonna lift the feet, send those hips back, bend those knees, punch those elbows forward, and that bar should be secured on your rack by the time your feet land. So let's go ahead and give this drill a try. Toes, sternum, punch. And repeat, toes, sternum, punch. Now we're ready to add in some leg drive. So hopefully you're holding the bar with that hook grip that we talked about earlier, fingers, index finger, and middle finger overlapping the thumb. Now when you're holding the bar in the clean, it is going to have a lower contact point on your legs than in the snatch. When we have the snatch with a wider grip, because the wide grip places the bar a little bit higher, you'll notice that because your grip is more narrow with the clean, that the bar may actually contact you right at your upper thighs. Okay, so just under the hip crease, and that is completely normal. You don't want to get in the habit of bending the arms to bring that bar up to the hip where you normally extend in the snatch. You want to make sure that you're keeping that bar and extending when that bar is right at that contact point of your hips. And if you need to, you can even just kind of bump that bar against your hips a couple of times just to kind of feel where that contact point is. We're going to find our pulling stance, and to do this, just do a few hops in place a few times. This is going to give you the most powerful stance of where you're going to start the clean. Now what we're going to do is practice dipping, jumping, and punching our elbows through, kind of continuing the same drill that we did here, except now we're going to start the bar from the hips, and we're going to add a little bit of a leg drive into it. We're going to dip, load the feet evenly, we're going to drive, jump through the toes, and then we're going to pull the bar immediately after we jump into that front rack position. Now it is very important here that you do not bend the arms before the legs extend, because if you pull that bar away from its power position with the arms before you use the legs, you just taken that bar away from its most powerful point, which is right at that hip crease, or right just below the hip crease where that bar makes contact, and you just lost a lot of power. So you want to keep those arms there in place. If you need to practice just doing a few jumps, keeping those arms like big heavy cables, pointing down to the ground, keeping those knuckles turned down, curling the wrist slightly in, just to get the feel of using your hips first. Go ahead and do that. And then we're going to dip, drive, and then pull that bar, keeping it close to us, drive the shoulder under. Now, as you're doing the high hang power clean, you want to make sure that your torso stays straight up and down. You're not leaning it back or forth, and you're not allowing that bar to come away from you. So you want to keep those forearms pointed down, and then turn those elbows through, aiming to pull yourself under the bar when that bar gets to the middle of your sternum or right in the middle of your chest. Again, remembering to punch those elbows and the feet at the same time. So when you hear your feet land, your elbows should already be pointing at the wall in front of you or wherever their highest point is in that front rack position. Let's move on to a hang clean that starts a little bit further down the thighs. So we were doing a high hang clean, which means that the bar starts a little bit higher up on the legs. Now we're going to be doing a regular hang clean where the bar starts with just a little bit more runway down the middle of the thighs. Now, in order to get to this position here, notice I'm not just bending the knees forward. In fact, I'm keeping the knees back, and I am loading the hamstrings. I'm feeling a stretch, an active usage and stretch of the hamstrings and the posterior chain back here as I am setting up for the hang clean. So if you're going to start with the bar right at the top of the upper thighs there where the bar naturally sits, you're going to have your feet in your pulling stance. So if you need to jump a few times, find where that starting stance is. You're going to send your hips back, and you're going to slide the bar down your thighs, keeping it right over the middle of the foot. So the goal with the clean is we want to keep that bar right over our area of base, which is right over the middle center of our foot. If we were to make a big stripe right down the arch of our foot there, we want that bar to stay right over that. So we have to send our thighs and our knees back so that the bar doesn't get pushed forward in front of the feet. So we're sending the knees back and making sure we're keeping our chin fixed forward, gaze straight forward. We don't want to look at the floor. We want to keep our gaze straight so that when we're moving and we're doing a clean, our body moves around the bar and we're moving around our face. Our face does not allow the bar to go forward or back. So after you practice sliding the bar down and back a few times, and you want to make sure that you're hugging the bar in, using all these muscles here, your lats, right behind the armpits, to keep that bar hugged in place, keeping those arms like big heavy cables. Then we're going to practice going into our jumps. Slide it in, jump, keeping those abs tight, same distance between ribs and the hip bones, not allowing it to expand or overly contract. Do a few jumps in place, slide, hop. And then we can add in our turnover. Slide up, punch. Slide up, and punch. And remember with the clean, the distance the bar travels is not very far. It's just between the thigh to middle of the chest. We're only looking about 1 to 1.5 feet here. If you're a little bit taller, maybe a couple of feet, but it's not as far as a snatch. So again, you don't want to over pull and have that bar crash on you at the shoulder. You want to make sure that you're actively controlling, pulling right to the mid-sternum, and then pulling your chest and shoulders under to meet the bar at that point. A couple things to be mindful of as you're practicing the hang power clean is making sure that you're resetting and taking each one as its own lift. You might find yourself to go right to this lower hang position each time and reset down here, but notice that the longer that you're staying in this hang clean position, the more you're fatiguing your posterior and your back. So you want to make sure that you're resetting at the top of the hips each time. So as you lower the bar, bringing the elbows over, catching it right in that hip pocket, and then resetting each time, sliding down, feeling that load even through the feet, and then jumping, pushing the feet into the floor, punching those elbows through. So take the time to reset at the top of the hip each time so you can set your back flat You can keep that back flat as you're hinging your hips back, keeping your knees back, keeping your shins vertical to the ground, making sure that those knees aren't sticking forward, but you're keeping your knee right behind that line of the shoelace. If there is a glass wall right in front of your legs, you're keeping your knees right behind that, so you can get a lot of power from your backside, from your posterior chain, and not just your quads. Lastly, just do a double check to make sure that you're not landing with your hips forward, but you're landing with your hips starting back in a front squat. So making sure you're sending your hips and heels back as your elbows go in the opposite direction will help you pull under and get a better position if you were to catch a lower into a squat clean or a full clean later on. Have fun with the hang power clean, and I'll see you in the next video where we talk about the basics of the jerk. I hope you enjoyed this beginner series on learning how to hang clean and go into the push jerk and split jerk. I also have a snatch specific mobility program. If you're looking to find ways to improve the mobility in the bottom of your snatch or your overhead squat position, it's a really great focused program, 30 days, and you get all the content for however long you want. It's unlimited, and I'm always there to answer questions, give you feedback, and whatever you'd like. So that's at artofbarbell.com/mobility. Lastly, be sure to follow me on Instagram. I constantly post weightlifting tips and technique things, mobility drills, a lot of great stuff to learn as a weightlifter. Keep practicing, get strong, and I'll see you soon.